As a kid, I lived with neglectful parents at best. At worst, Dad would turn his screams and fists on me, but I've learned quickly how to dodge the worst of it. Mom wasn't much help. She'd just smoke in the kitchen and bitch at him for staying out so late. At the time, we basically lived in the middle of nowhere. Our nearest neighbor were a long walk away for a 6-year-old, and we had trees between us. No one to run to for help. But I was a pretty small kid at my age. I learned that I could fit pretty much anywhere. The closet, dryer. I think even once I tucked myself under the futon in such a way I could still get some air, but no one could see me. I was a master at hiding, but not for a good reason. One night I chose to do something different. I could hear it in my dad's yells. He was pissed and was about to get violent. Mom wasn't helping either, just piling fuel onto the inferno of a flame. I knew I had to find a good hiding spot. I had gotten an idea a few days before when I realized that the lattice covering the bottom half of our porch had a hole in it. Not big enough to fit a full-grown man, most likely, but I could fit my skinny 6-year-old in there no problem. So wrapping myself in my blanket and grabbing my hippo stuffy, I snuck out the window and ran into the backyard. In the middle of autumn, when it was 40 degrees out and temperatures were steadily dropping. I crawled under the porch, scraping my elbow and getting splinters in my palms, but I fit inside. It was actually quite spacious compared to most of my hiding spots. I couldn't sit up all the way, but I had plenty of room to spread out my limbs. Of course, I was getting covered in dirt. It had rained a few days ago, so the mud was still a little wet. I wrapped myself in my blankie the best I could and settled in for the night. But soon, even with my blankie and my hippo, my teeth were chattering so hard and I could barely breathe. I didn't want to go back inside, knowing that if my dad caught me, I'd be in for the whipping of my life. So I just toughed it out. "Honey, are you cold?" The voice was not the voice of my mother, scratchy from all the smoking and screeching she did. It was sweet, like honey. I turned over to see a dim outline of a woman lying on her stomach next to me. She had a pretty butterfly necklace and was dirty like I was. I nodded, not wondering how she'd been down there without me noticing. The woman belly crawled forward and wrapped her arms around me, and I suddenly became warm, like I was sitting next to a campfire. I snuggled in her arms, not minding the mud. After all, we were both dirty. "You've gotten so big," the woman said, examining my face. "How old are you now, Alex?" 6. How did I know this woman again? I didn't think I did. 6? The woman gasped. "You're all grown up then. I'm so happy." She sighed pleasantly and stroked my hair. I had never felt so cozy in my life. "What's your name?" I asked. She smiled. I could hear it in her voice. "I'm Lily. What's your favorite things to do?" I had to think for a second. "I like board games and coloring." Lily chuckled. "Just like me then. Could never get enough of Scrabble. But I guess you're still young to play that, huh?" I nodded. "I want to play it though. I like the tiles. Would you play with me?" I heard Lily sharply inhale. I don't think I can. Your daddy put me under here, and I can't leave, but..." She thought for a second. "Alex, could you do me a favor?" "Of course." This lady was so nice, why wouldn't I do her a favor? "When you wake up in the morning, go to the police station. Ask for the officer named Lowell Joyce. Tell him where you can find Lily, okay? Underneath your back porch. He will come and get me, okay? And then maybe we can play Scrabble." Yippee! I was too excited at the possibility of playing Scrabble to notice how Lily's voice caught at the end. I nodded vigorously. "I'll do it. We can be on the same team, right?" Lily softly laughed. "I'll help you understand the rules. Good night, Alex." When I woke up the next morning, I heard Lily's voice. "Go now. Your dad's gone at work. I'll tell you how to get to the station." Rubbing my eyes, I crawled out from underneath the porch and went to my house to grab my shoes and coat. I shivered in the frosty cold, but I thought Lily was right behind me. After my shoes and coat were on, I started walking. It was long enough to get to the neighbor's house. I can't remember how long it took to get to the police station. Although I have no idea why no one pulled over to see what the hell a 6-year-old in his dirty pajamas was doing walking alongside the road. But Lily kept guiding me onward. Wait. Okay, cross the street now. Turn right here. Keep going, you've almost made it. I nearly collapsed with exhaustion by the time I walked into the station. The guys were in the front chatting and having a good time and didn't see me until I was almost at the front desk. Whoa, kid. You okay? One of the officers knelt down to my level, eyes wide. I nodded. I'm okay. Can I speak to Lil Joyce? One of the officers picked me up. Sure, kid. Sure. Let's go get you someplace warm. Holy shit, your lips are blue. I remember quietly scolding the man to watch his language. Shit was a bad word. I was given some warm cocoa and wrapped up in a blanket by the time the old man with a graying mustache sat by me. Hey kid, I'm Sheriff Joyce. What's your name? Alex. I sat down my cup and looked him straight in the eye. I was told to tell you that Lily is under my back porch. You need to go and let her out so she could play Scrabble. I had never seen a grown man turn pale before. Lots of things blurred together at that point. I remember being taken back to my house, and there were a lot of police cars and people around. The back porch was surrounded by yellow tape, and someone was taking a black bag away while my dad was in handcuffs. After that, I lived with my grandparents, which were Sheriff Joyce and his wife. I tried to ask him what happened and who Lily was, but I always got shut down. I was too young to know. But life got better, a lot better. Grandpa was the best man I could have hoped for in my life. We went out on weekends, to the movies, where he let me have a giant soda even though I had to pee in the middle of the movie. When I asked him if I could drink when I was 13, he let me try beer. I spat it out and didn't touch it again. He never judged me for my love of art, letting me paint my whole bedroom multiple times over the years. I felt safe around him. He never laid a hand on me. My grandmother was amazing too. Over the week she would homeschool me, along with teaching me things that you wouldn't learn in school, such as how to respect others and not to take their crap, and cooking, lots of cooking. I could make my own birthday cake by the time I was 12, but I usually made them for my friends. I had a lot of those after I was free from my dad. When I turned 16, Grandpa took me back to my dad's house. The whole thing had been bulldozed over, but I could still see some yellow tape wound around a few of the trees, faded and torn. We sat on the back of his truck. He had opened a beer and drank half of it before setting it down and grabbing me an orange soda. After I drank it, he told me, Lily was your mother. Good thing you didn't tell me when I was drinking. I would have had it coming out of my nose. My mom? I questioned, confused. Your actual mom. The woman that you lived with your dad was not your mother. My granddad grabbed another beer. Lily was my daughter. I loved her so much. But when you were around 6 months old, she vanished. My stomach dropped. My dad just imprisoned her under the porch? I asked, starting to feel sick. Grandpa took another deep breath before setting the unopened beer down. That's something I'll never be able to understand. Lily told you to find me and that she loved Scrabble? Yeah. She kept me warm that night. I would have probably frozen to death if she hadn't been there. I was the stupid kid, even I knew that. Grandpa went dead quiet before he opened the beer and slammed the whole thing. Alex, Lily had been dead the whole time she was gone. When we dug her up, she was bones. Experts confirmed it, and your dad confessed what happened. They had gotten into a fight and he threw her down the stairs, and she broke her neck. He clenched his fist. I knew he had something to do with her disappearance, but I never had proof until you walked into my station, covered in dirt, telling me that she was under your porch. I was floored. I couldn't breathe. All I could do was shake my head. But I saw her. She was alive. She had a butterfly necklace. I trailed off, and Grandpa pulled out the evidence baggie from his pocket. There was a butterfly necklace, all right, rusty and parts of the paint chipped off. But I remembered it clearly, as I remembered Lily's voice. Grandpa took a shaky breath as he pressed the bag into my hands. Lily loved you so much. It's why she stuck around with that bastard. You were her whole world. She was constantly taking pictures of you and sending them to us in the mail. Sometimes a mother's love can accomplish things that no humans can do. My eyes overflowed with tears as I clutched the necklace to my chest, choking on sobs. I leaned against my grandpa. He held me tight, and I swear I felt a few of his tears hit the top of my head. And just for a brief moment, I swear I felt the warm love I felt that night under the porch. I had always been aware of the deep web. You hear the craziest, most messed up stories from people who have enough balls to explore it. Websites that involve human experimentation, hiring a hitman, and watching people through their own security cameras. It's fucked up. But honestly, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't slightly interested. Now, just to point out, there's no malicious intent behind my exploration of the deep web. I was just curious to see if it was really as bad as people said it was. The first thing I stumbled on was a website extremely centered around death, which gave me a really uneasy feeling, so I didn't really hang around that webpage very long. It takes quite a bit to freak me out, so it's safe to say I was a little surprised that I couldn't even stomach the first website I clicked on. But hey, it's not supposed to be unicorn and rainbows, right? Next, I clicked a website that was dedicated to watching people through security cameras. Most of the screens showed empty living rooms and patios. Some of them showed oddly filled rooms, like rooms that were packed with stuffed animals, and another that was eerily decorated with fucking Christmas lights and fake Santa Claus statues. Another screen showed a young woman doing yoga. That one had a lot of views, but I didn't watch that one very long. Something inside me just felt ill and just wrong. Like what I was doing was sickening. I shook my head, blinking away any more curiosity before I hovered the mouse over the tiny X to close the window. Right before I pressed the mouse, I saw a blue link under the black screen that said, "Proceed with caution." I bit down on my back teeth, yelling internally to leave the page and don't click the link. It's not worth it. It could be murder. Would that make me an accomplice? What if someone was skinning an animal or some shit like that? But then again, what if it wasn't? I don't know what the hell propelled me to move my mouse away from the window and hover over the link instead. But that's where I ended. My curiosity always got the best of me. And no matter how twisted my stomach felt, or how strong the feeling of dread was that lingered right over my head, I had to know. I really just had to know where the link led to, or it would drive me crazy until I finally found out. So, I pressed my mouse down and watched the link turn purple. I felt my mouth go dry as I watched the screen slowly loading. The page was comprised of a large screen, like a security camera page, only just one. The room was concrete and was dark. There must have been a night vision camera or something, but everything was a weird blue-green tinge. But you could tell that there was little to no light. There was a dark liquid on the floor, in a medium-sized puddle. I told myself it was gasoline. Don't ask me why. Movement in the far right of the screen caught my attention, and I immediately perked up in my desk chair, inching my face closer to the screen of my laptop. It looked like an arm, like someone's forearm. They're standing there, not really moving, but subtly swaying, just enough not to look completely still. "Hey," I said, before shaking my head and slapping my mouth shut. "Stupid." Then, the person walked. They walked towards the left of the screen. I felt my stomach knot, felt my throat tingle and tighten, bile raising up the back of my throat. I knew my mouth was open, gaping, and my eyes were wide, face screwed up into an expression of pure disgust. It was a young woman. She looked like she couldn't have been older than 25 or so. Long, dark, and dirty hair, in tangles, like she'd been pulling at it. Her leg was dragging. Her other skinny leg was doing most of the work as she limped weakly. Her head was down, looking at the floor. The sound of her dragging her foot across the concrete echoed in my silent room. I didn't think it could get any worse. I was so fucking wrong. Suddenly, the woman raised her head, and it looked like it weighed a ton on her teeny body. I hadn't noticed it before, only able to barely make out the side of her profile, but now it was clear as day. She looked around, her eyes watering with tears and black makeup streaming down her face. Small strands of bloody thread were entwined in her lips, messily tied, locking them together. Dark blood stained her chin, probably from where she tried desperately to open her mouth, to scream, before realizing she couldn't. Her dainty fingers were stained as well, the same color as a puddle on the concrete. My whole body felt weak. My stomach was sick. I tried to tell myself it was fake, that this was all a big hoax. My eyes scanned to the bottom left of the screen. 5,623. There were 5,623 people watching this. Unable to fight it any longer, I ran to the bathroom, puking inside my toilet bowl. Everything in me felt disgusting, wrong, and just twisted. Once I was finally done, I laid on the floor in the bathroom, letting the cool tiles try to soothe my burning body. My head was spinning. I kept repeating to myself over and over again in my head that I shouldn't have clicked that link. I should have left. I should have closed the fucking window and told my inner curiosity to fuck itself. Instead, I'm laying on the floor, the bathroom reeking of vomit, and my mind in a complete mess over what the hell I was supposed to do. Should I get the link and send it to the police? Should I call them now? My first instinct was to copy and paste the link, just in case, then call the police and inform them of what just happened. Maybe they could trace the IP address or something. Maybe they would recognize the girl and know where to start looking. Maybe I could save their life. I would feel really dumb if this was fake, just to get viewers. But I wasn't about to gamble, not with what was at stake. I ignored the dizzy feeling flooding my head as I jumped up, grabbing the doorknob and twisting it a bit too harshly. When I flung the door open, my phone buzzed in my pocket, scaring the living shit out of me. I stopped mid-panic and picked up with a shaky hand. I saw my girlfriend's name and immediately slid to answer. My voice was a complete wreck, my eyes finding the screen where the girl shrunk down to the ground. The sound of her cries all around my room, making my body feel rigid. I had nothing to throw up, but I still felt sick. Madeline, you're not gonna believe what I just fucking saw. What? Are you okay? Have you been crying? No, I'm not okay. Averting my eyes to the screen. I know you said to stay away from the deep web, but... Are you kidding me? Her voice went from caring to mad in a split second. I told you to stay away from that place. You never listened to me. You never fucking do. There's a girl, I said weakly. She's trapped in some basement. Her mouth is sewn shut. There's blood all over her face. I don't know what to do. Madeline. The girl's cries got louder, more desperate, but muffled. I'm so sorry. Close it out, clear your history, and never go back there again. I'm not kidding. But should I call? No. Her voice was stern now. You don't know if it's bullshit. It's probably staged to gain disgusting viewers, apparently like yourself. People do it all the time. That's why I said it's best that you stay away from there. You can get yourself into a lot of trouble. I didn't say anything, wordlessly walking over to my desk. My hands shook as I raised the mouse to the small X once more. My eyes watched as the number of viewers slowly ticked higher and higher before I closed the window. I felt even worse than before. Okay, we can report them tomorrow, just in case. But for now, just go to sleep and stay the hell away. I can't believe you went there in the first place. I didn't have the energy to argue with her. Guilt plagued my whole body, drowning me. It was all I could feel. I told her goodnight, that I was sorry and I loved her, before I hung up and made my way to the couch to sleep. Or try to sleep. I didn't feel right, not while that girl was still trapped, unable to scream for help, unable to talk at all. I know it could be fake, but was that a risk I was willing to take? I looked up some Google searches over what is fake on the deep web, and I read multiple stories about staged webcam videos, which made me feel a bit better. It didn't make the sick, guilty feeling go away though. It's safe to say I didn't get much sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, or even began to drift off, I would see the woman's face, the thread laced into her lips, and the blood staining on her mouth, her fingers, and the floor. I continued to grow more anxious and uneasy, deciding to maybe get out of the house. Heading over to the local CVS and picking up some melatonin might help. I threw my blanket off, slid my shoes on, and grabbed my keys and wallet from the nightstand. The cool air felt amazing and did wonders to calm my whirlwind of thoughts in my head. I went to check the time, realizing I left my phone at home. Not a huge deal. The store was only a few minutes away from my house. I ended up buying melatonin and a stronger sleeping pill just in case that didn't work. I also got a pack of bottled water to help rehydrate after I vomited all the contents from my stomach earlier. By the time I got home, I felt much better, which lasted about 3 seconds before I noticed that my front door was wide open. Now, I may have been in a state of shock or panic, but I never ever would leave my front door open or even unlocked. My heart immediately began to race. I got out of my car, closing the door quietly, and unlocking my trunk and grabbing a crowbar that I kept in there. "Who's there?" I yelled into the house, waiting for any noise. "Who is in there?" My own voice was shaking and weak. I was met with complete silence, keeping the crowbar up, ready to strike. I walked to the couch and felt for my phone. As soon as I found it, I hit the emergency button and waited till I got a hold of 911, letting the operator know that I think someone had broken into my house. She told me that the police were on their way. After checking around the house for anything odd, I decided to give my girlfriend a call, letting her know what happened. The phone rang and rang and rang some more. After getting the voicemail, I hung up, knowing that she was probably asleep since this was late at night. I waited about 20 minutes or so for the police to show up, and walked them in like a scared puppy as they checked every room. They ended up having me just fill out a report, and they would keep a patrol car in the area just in case someone else gets hit. As they were leaving, I checked to see if Madeline had called back yet, but there wasn't any missed calls. I, however, did notice several outgoing calls to her cell phone at 3:12, 3:14, 3:17, and 3:20, and another one at 3:56, which was around the time I had gotten home. My mind went into automatic panic, knowing the fact that I did not make these calls. I quickly checked my text, reading that I apparently sent her a text at 3:23. "Hey, can't sleep, coming over. Mind leaving the back door unlocked so I can get in?" I didn't send that message. My stomach dropped. My heart thudded loudly in my chest. And I noticed a reply directly underneath. "Sorry, I was sleeping. Thanks for waking me up, by the way. Lose your key again? It's unlocked. Don't be too late." Without a second thought, I jumped, running to lock all the doors and windows in my house, keeping the crowbar tight in my hand as I ran to my car. I drove as fast as my little Civic would allow me to, all the way to her house, ignoring any stoplights. It only took me 3 minutes to get there, but I still knew I would be too late. I made my way to her back door, feeling every cell in my body burn when I saw it wide open. My face was hot, my hands were shaking, but I stepped in, crowbar raised like a bat, ready to swing. I tried to keep my emotions at bay as I looked around the dark house. "Madeline," I called out. "Are you okay, babe?" Nothing, just silence. "Madeline!" A small scream came from her bedroom, just up the stairs. My legs jerked to run as I flew up the stairs, slamming her door open. I looked at her empty bed, her empty room. Confused, I heard her scream again, only this time, I heard it was coming through her computer monitor. I felt numb as I looked at the screen, noticing the same website I saw earlier. Only instead of one woman, I saw two. The first was laying on the floor, not moving, in the puddle of dark liquid. I recognized the second girl, just as I had recognized her voice. My heart shattered as I saw her face, streaked in blood. The same threading was sewn into her eyelids, locking them shut. Her screams hit my bones, surrounding my body. It's all I could hear. Her face was twisted in pure horror. I cried as her voice was beginning to go out and continued to grow weaker and more rasped. I locked my jaw, picking up my cell phone and dialing 911 for the second time. This time it only rang once before a deep, gravelly voice from another man answered, "You shouldn't have called." Chills shot down my body, and I heard the phone hit a thud as it hit the carpeted floor. My breath hitched in my throat, and I bent over to pick it up, hanging up the call and racing downstairs. How did he do that? How did he redirect my call away from the police? I felt my heart race as I darted to her back door. In a frenzy, I sprinted to the closest house. I pounded on the door, screaming on the top of my lungs, until the neighbors opened it. Her face was tired, confused, and scared. She let me in, and I explained in frantic tears what happened. I'm typing this on my phone as we both get a hold of the cops, but neither of our cell phones are going through, and neither was her landline. I think someone is messing with our signal, and they may have cut her line. But we're gonna keep trying. I'm scared for me, I'm scared for my girlfriend, and I'm scared for her neighbor. I don't know what's gonna happen to me. If you don't hear from me again, please take this advice and experience to heart. Stay away from the deep web. I worked in security at Disney World, the happiest place on earth. Typically, I wouldn't say where I work, as obviously there are some pretty strict rules and things employees can't put online, but I just don't think I could tell this properly without that context. And honestly, I think this may be it for me anyway with this job. I can't see myself working here any longer now. I've been with the company for 23 years. The first 20, I worked in the parks, nabbing shoplifters, and rounding up people who were drinking too much for the heat. Occasionally there would be a fight to break up, but people usually kept it pretty mild. The heat and walking was getting too much for me the last few years, so I asked to be transferred somewhere else, with AC, and the company moved me to one of their resorts. While the working conditions were 110% better, as far as the climate and the comfort go, the guest issues were trickier, mainly domestic. I guess the expense of and stress of a vacation got to a lot of people, and I'd be called by neighboring rooms because some mom or dad were yelling at each other. I would try to suggest that they would take a nap or go do separate activities for a bit, and that would usually calm them down. But none of that is what I'm here for. I've got to get this out while I still have time. 3 days ago I got a call from management. Apparently a couple days before that, housekeeping had went to a room that should have been turned over that day. Turnover is when a guest leaves about 11 a.m. and the next guest checks in around 3 p.m. But when housekeeping arrived, all of the guest items were still in the room. Housekeeping made a note of it and moved on. But during the next few days, when they entered the room, everything was still there and untouched. I went to go check it out, and sure enough, there was an empty room full of luggage, clothes, snacks, some toys, everything that a family would need on vacation. The manager had already looked up the previous reservation, and it was for a family. A dad, mom, and 2 little kids. I tried calling the phone number that they had given us, but all I got was voicemail. We were all stumped, so I made the call that the housekeeper should clean the room, and that we would take all the family's personal items to be held until we got in contact with someone. I went digging into the reservation more. The family arrived 5 days before housekeeping discovered all their stuff. I found out that the family had paid a parking fee on their vehicle. Description was listed. A quick walk of the parking lots, and I easily located their vehicle. So that ruled out that they got in a car accident, or them just deciding to leave all their stuff behind. Next, I saw that they had bought a dining plan. This is when a guest prepays for all their food. They're given a certain number of credits to use for meals. This family had only used 3 credits, and the last one was 2 days after they checked in. It appeared that the day that they arrived, they got here late and probably stayed on the resort. The next day, they used 2 credits in Epcot. The second park day, they used just 1 credit at the Magic Kingdom, and it was at breakfast time. Now at Disney, there's something called magic bands. Magic bands are worn by guests, and they act like a room key, a parking ticket, a credit card, dining reservation payment, and a fast pass, which is a system used to bypass a line. It took some work, but I was finally able to look up this family's fast pass history. The day that they had went to the Magic Kingdom, they had breakfast at a restaurant in the park, rode a couple of rides, and then rode their last ride, It's a Small World, around 11 a.m., then nothing. Finally, it was time to bring someone else in on this. I called a co-worker at Magic Kingdom and asked him to pull security footage for It's a Small World at the time they rode it, and I made my way over there. When I got there, my friend was very confused, almost distraught looking. He showed me what he had found. There's usually a camera in the direction of where rides load and unload. The footage showed me them scanning their bands to use the fast pass for the ride and boarding the ride. The footage on the exit of the ride just showed the other people in the car exiting. They weren't there. Of course we thought the worst. Maybe one of the kids had fallen out and the mom and dad and the other kid had gotten off in the middle of the ride to help, and they all got injured or killed or stuck in the machinery somewhere. So we shut down the ride. Middle of the damn day. We turned off all the music and turned up all the lights. Me and my buddy walked the ride 3 times before we called in help. Eventually, there were close to 10 cast members searching, and we didn't find shit except for 3 cell phones and a hat. I was stumped. I've kept digging for the past couple days, and I'm not sure who to tell what I found to next. I've called the police, and I suppose they're on their way. But the company has a way of covering up things like this, and I decided I can't live with myself if I don't put out some sort of warning. I kept digging into the reservation over the last couple days, and today, and I noticed that they had purchased a memory maker. There are photographers all over the parks, and cameras in a lot of the rides, and with a memory maker, these photos are all free. They automatically get added to each guest's Disney account when the system sees that their picture has been taken, and the system always knows. Everyone's whereabouts are always known with the magic bands. Well, I opened up the memory maker photo album, and I swear, there's 732 pictures. The first 30 or so were pretty normal. Epcot, a few rides, in front of the castle, but the rest were all in It's a Small World. The ride only takes 1 picture per go-around, so it appears as though this family has ridden this ride over 700 times. The first picture was pretty normal. Everyone looked happy. It was a busy day and a full car of guests. The next one is rough to look at. The car is empty except for this little family, and they look so darn confused. The next 10 or 15, I can see the dad getting angry and yelling. The mom is holding on to those 2 kids like her life depended on it, and you can see the kids getting increasingly upset, crying, and it goes on and on and on. After 50 or so, it looks like they're trying to get out. In one, the dad is missing. In another, they're all gone. Maybe like they bailed early in the ride and tried to walk out. But in the very next one, they're all right back in the damn car. After around 450 or so, I only see the mom and kids. It's just when I look closely, I can see the dad, maybe just his body now, slumped down in one of the other seats. Since about 675, there's just the mom and 1 kid, another body in another seat. The mom and kid aren't moving anymore. I think that they are still alive, just damn near catatonic, looking straight ahead, pale. And I swear on my fucking life, the dolls are moving or something. In some of these pictures I can tell that they aren't where they should be. I even saw one of the dolls in the car with a family. I can't look anymore, or I'm gonna lose my lunch. I closed the album. Its file size has increased since I closed it. God, are there new pictures being added? I see on the security camera that the local PD has just arrived, and they'll take over soon. I wish I knew what the fuck was going on, but I also wish this damn thing had never landed on my lap. I don't think I'll be able to update this. After I talk to the police, I'm gonna walk out of here and never come back. I just wanted to get this out there before Disney feeds the media some bullshit cover-up as to where the family vanished to. They didn't vanish. I know where they are. The story that I'm about to tell you took place when I was a teenager. I was living with my family. It was me, my parents, my older brother and sister, and my grandmother. I had a younger sister too, but she and my grandfather both died in a car accident several years earlier. We moved houses not long after. Our new house was much bigger. I think having a smaller, cozier house would have let us feel the absence too easily. In a larger home, we could just dismiss their absence as them being in another room, even though we knew they weren't. Anyway, one Halloween, our whole family minus Grandma were gathered in the living room. We had lit a fire and put a movie on for the evening. It was late and the trick-or-treaters were starting to thin out. The movie was in a bit of a lull when we heard a shriek come from upstairs. Instantly we knew it was Grandma who had screamed, so we all ran up in a panic. As we climbed up the stairs, we could hear her sobbing and saying, "It's you, it's really, really you." She kept repeating that in kind of a hoarse cry as we made our way up to her room. When we got there, she had fallen down onto the floor with her back against the wall. She looked paler than any of us had ever seen her before. Tears streaked her face and her breath was ragged, but her expression was a mixture of bliss and excitement. Standing across the room, dressed in an old-fashioned suit with a hat in his hands, stood my grandfather. I'm sure I don't have to tell you how stunned we all were. None of us are particularly superstitious, and even if we were, that's just not the sort of thing you would ever expect to come across. Had I known what I know now, I would have ordered him out of our house that very minute, but I didn't. My mom was the first one to break down. Seeing her father again brought tears to her eyes immediately, but my grandfather simply smiled and reassured her. We all spoke for what felt like hours, hearing the story of how my grandmother was in her room, getting ready for bed, when she heard a tapping on the window. When she turned, she saw his face there, just peeking in at her. She explained that this wasn't the first time something like this happened. When you lose someone you love, you see them everywhere. But when he didn't leave, and motioned her to open the window, and then climbed in once she had, Grandma knew it wasn't the same. That's when she screamed and we came in. After that, Grandpa regaled us with tales of the other side, how beautiful it is, how all your wildest dreams can't compare to the reality of it. I'd like to tell you that I was skeptical, but I was just happy to see my grandpa again. He explained how, when the time is right, spirits can come back to the land of the living, and there's so much superstition and rituals going on during Halloween that the barrier between the worlds grew thin. He apologized for not visiting sooner, claiming he had tried many times, but simply hadn't had enough experience until this year, and we all believed him. Once all of that was finished, it was best if we left my grandparents alone to catch up. Grandpa stood up and turned to my grandmother and reached out his hand. "I got a lot to tell you. Come with me," he smiled as he said this, a warm, friendly smile. She took his hand, and together they walked down the hall and out of sight. The rest of us went back downstairs, still shaken by what had just occurred. We spent a long time in silence there, by the fire. Trick-or-treaters would still stop by, but even more infrequently than before. Eventually, we got back to talking and joking, almost as if there wasn't a ghost upstairs. It was the best night we had spent together in years. Mother was just telling us a story about Grandpa when he was her age, when the doorbell rang again. It was going on 11 o'clock, so we weren't expecting any more children. A cry of, "Trick or treat," came from outside our door. So my mom stopped her story and went to the door. My mom loved children. She peeked out the front door window and caught a glimpse of the young girl standing there in her pink princess outfit. She swung the door open, not waiting to get a full view of the girl before complimenting her costume. "Well, don't you look, Adore." Then there was a sound of the bowl hitting the floor. My mother froze mid-sentence. "What's wrong, Mommy?" The voice didn't come from any of us. It came from outside. My father, older siblings, and I looked at each other before racing to the front door. When I got there, my heart leaped into my throat and tears filled my eyes. Standing in the doorway was my younger sister, Sarah. Sarah, the one who had been killed in the car crash years earlier. Those of you who have shared a house with a young child can imagine how deeply their absences felt. There is no aspect of life that they don't affect in one way or another. And when she died, nothing was the same. And there she stood, not a day older, and not a mark on her body. I broke down crying. When I looked around, I saw that my whole family was crying, and Sarah looked deeply troubled by it. "Did I do something wrong, Mommy?" The voice snapped us all back into the moment. "Of course you didn't, sweetie," my mother replied hurriedly, adding, "We just missed you. Can I come in now?" We let her in, of course. The family then talked like we hadn't talked in years. Sarah was just the same as she had ever been. Back then I would have called her annoying. But that night, there's nothing that she could have done to annoy me, even if she tried. Once we had been back together for about an hour or so, Sarah looked towards my parents. "Mom, Dad, can I show you something?" "Of course you can, honey," my mother said. She still had a tear in her eye. Sarah leapt off the couch. "Great, come with me," holding out both of her hands for my mother and father to take. Suddenly I realized that Grandma was still upstairs and had no idea that Sarah had come back, so I went upstairs to get her. When I got upstairs, I saw my grandfather coming out of the room quietly and shutting the door behind him. When I asked him where Grandma was, he told me that she's resting. I asked him if she could come downstairs, and he simply said that wouldn't be possible, before adding that she would have plenty of time to spend with Sarah. I was excited. "Did this mean that you're staying with us?" I asked my grandfather, and he just smiled and went downstairs with me. My older siblings were chatting in the living room when Sarah came skipping in from around the corner. "Where's Mom and Dad?" I asked. "Well, when we went to the basement, they started kissing and hugging, and told me to go back upstairs, so I did." That didn't sound right. I couldn't imagine my mother leaving Sarah's side for a moment tonight. Nobody else seemed to find it strange though. Grandpa just laughed and said adults were weird, and I would understand someday. Then he turned to my brother and said that he brought him a gift, something to make up for the lost birthdays and Christmases. He held out his hand for my brother to take. "Come with me." It was only at this point I grew suspicious. I asked Grandpa where the gift was, to which he said, "Oh, don't you worry, you'll get yours soon enough." I urged my brother not to go with him, but he didn't listen, taking my grandfather's hand, and the two of them went down the hall together. Sarah turned to us and said, "Mommy and Daddy have been down there for a while. Let's go check on them." She reached out for us. "Come with me." My older sister reached for Sarah, but I slapped her hand away. "Billy, what the?" "Don't go with her," I begged. "Come on, Meg," Sarah said. "Billy just doesn't want to see Mom and Dad kissing." Before I could stop her, Meg took Sarah's hand, and the two of them went downstairs to the basement. Grandpa started coming back down the hall, alone, and his eyes met mine. "I've got your gift ready now, Billy. Come with me." I ran past him into the room and shut the door behind me. I didn't know what to do. I didn't have a cell phone yet, and there are no home phones in my room. They hadn't been openly violent yet, but how long was that going to last? All I could do was sit in there and wait for them to either break in or leave. Heavy footsteps come down the hall and stopped outside my door. My grandfather began calling me, begging me to come out so he could give me my present. A few minutes later, his voice was joined with Sarah's, asking me why I didn't want to come play with her. "Why don't you love me anymore, Billy? What did I do wrong?" She sounded like she was on the verge of tears. I can't possibly tell you how hard it was to stay in there, listening to my little sister beg me to play with her one last time. But the survival instinct is a strong one, and I kept the door shut. The clock chimed 12, and all fell silent. I looked under the door, and my grandfather's figure was no longer casting a shadow underneath. I placed my ear to the door, listened carefully. I heard nothing. My family was out there, possibly hurt. I had to go check, or call for help, do something at least. I took a deep breath and steadied myself, and opened the door. The hallway was empty. Across the hall, through an open door, I could see my brother laying on the ground, motionless. He was pale, and didn't look like he was breathing. I was only in high school, but I ran over to him. I checked his wrist and neck for a pulse, but I found nothing. All I saw was one of his hands was tinged black. I ran upstairs. I should have called the police or an ambulance or somebody, But my mind wasn't working. I found Grandma in the same state, pale, not breathing, her hands slightly blackened. My heart started racing. I had to go into the basement. But I couldn't go in the basement because I knew what I would find. The rest of my family just lying there, pale and motionless, dead. I sat there for a long time, paralyzed, before I decided I had to know. The descent to the basement felt longer than it ever had before. I felt cold and numb. Each step felt like an eternity. But when I got to the bottom, I saw exactly what I knew I would find. My parents and older sister laying on the floor. I began to cry. Cry like I hadn't done in years. Like I hadn't done since my little sister died. "You stupid boy." The voice was sinister and evil. Sounded like every demon in every horror movie you've ever seen, and worse. I spun around, and Sarah was there. But she was different. Her eyes were empty sockets, and her mouth was a black, lipless hole, ringed with fangs. "You have no more family. No more loved ones. They all came with me. They are mine now. And you? You will live the rest of your life alone. You will die somewhere, forgotten, alone, and afraid. You will never see your family again. Ever." Then the thing paused, and let out its hand. "Unless, of course, you come with me. You can be with us all again, forever." I like to tell you now that I kept my distance, that I told her to get out of my house, or at least that I sat frozen. But what she said was true. I felt it deep in my bones. I would never see my family again if I didn't go with her. I was just a kid, a scared, stupid kid who wanted his mom. I stood there shaking, and I reached out my hand slowly. Sarah's mouth formed a sick smile as I approached. Then there was a noise upstairs. The clock chimed 1 o'clock, and I looked up just for a heartbeat. There was a distant scream, and when I looked forward again, Sarah was gone. I called 911, and it was eventually deemed that my family died from carbon monoxide poisoning, and that the leak had spontaneously resolved itself and disappeared through my grandma's open window. My experiences were brought on by hysteria and oxygen deprivation. It could have been worse. They could have blamed me. I was legally an adult at this point, so the estate fell to me. I sold the house and everything in it and moved to a small apartment, using the proceeds to put myself through school after I graduated from high school. If you see a loved one who has passed away this Halloween, please don't let them in. Don't take their hand, and never, ever go with them. You might be asking why I'm sharing this now. It's a fair question. For many years I've been terrified of the things that came to my house that night. For decades, I thought that the scariest thing in the world was the idea of whatever came to visit, whatever we let into our home, that they weren't my family. This year, though, I had a thought that was even more disturbing still. What if they were? I've been on my knees trying to scrub up all this blood and scraps of paper for the last half hour. I'm making some progress, but it's slow, and I keep having to stop when my hands start shaking too much. I'm out of my apartment for the moment, sitting on the floor in the hallway, and I can feel my nerves starting to settle some. I'm going to write this out so I'll have it all on record, and also so I can wait a bit before having to go back in. It started when I was bored yesterday. The internet was out in my apartment. After casting for a couple of hours and trying to read or do some cleaning, I was out of ideas to entertain myself. That's when I saw the box of stationery paper on my desk. My Aunt Emma had given me the stationery as a birthday gift the week before, and there's nothing inherently wrong with such a gift. It was a box of high quality paper and envelopes personalized with my initials at the top of the sheets of paper and on the back fold of the envelope. As a 70-year-old man, I would have probably thought it was cat's pajamas, but I'm a 25-year-old man, so not so much. But still, I was very bored, so I sat down at my desk and started messing around with it. At first I tried writing as neatly and fancy as I knew how. My handwriting is horrible. My best efforts looked like a slow 4th grader, as opposed to a slow 2nd grader. But it was something to do. Then I doodled for a bit, but my drawing skills were equally lacking. I was feeling myself getting drowsy, but then a thought occurred to me of what I should do with the stationery. I'd write a letter to myself. It was a stupid idea, but I thought it was kind of funny too. So I took out a clean sheet of paper and set to work. "Hey Scott, how are you doing today?" My day was kind of boring. Christy is out of town visiting her parents, and the internet is dead. I have zero ideas of what to do with myself. This is lame. Goodbye. Sincerely, Scott. The novelty of the idea had clearly worn off quickly, but I did fold it up and stick it into an envelope at least, even going as far as to address the letter to myself. Standing up from the table with a sigh, I lay down and fairly soon fell asleep. When I woke up, it was early evening, and the room was dimly lit by the fading twilight outside. I reached over and turned on my bedside lamp, blinking at its brightness. I hated taking naps. I always felt groggy afterwards, and I always had trouble sleeping later on in the night. Rubbing my eyes, I roll over discontentedly and began getting up. When my eyes lit upon my desk, I sat back down. The envelope with the letter I had written is different now. It was in a different spot for one, but I could tell from the bed it was also a different color and looked like it had a small stain in one of the corners. Standing up and going to my desk, I looked at the envelope closer before picking it up. My name and address were still on the front, but hadn't I written it smaller and more centered than that? Regardless, the envelope itself was definitely different, so clearly I hadn't written this at all. The next thought was that someone came into my apartment to either prank me or try to scare me. The obvious answer was Christine. It didn't really seem like something that she would do, but she was the only other person with the key. After I did a quick sweep of the apartment for intruders, I texted her. She swore that she was still half a state away, and she sent me a picture for proof. She also seemed worried and asked if I had called the cops. But I wasn't at that point yet. I needed to look inside of that envelope first. I pried it open carefully and peeked inside, seeing a light blue piece of paper that matched the envelope and was different than the cream-colored paper that I had used this afternoon. When I unfolded it, I was surprised to see it really looked like my handwriting. But it wasn't the same letter. Instead, it seemed to be responding to me. "Good to hear from you. I've been watching you when I can for years, and it seems like the universe has finally given us a way to talk. I'm guessing you live in apartment 3B on Nesbitt Street in Baltimore, right? And your Uncle Tom gave you the box of stationery for your birthday? It's so weird. I guess things have to line up just right. If it actually works and you're reading this, I know it will probably come to you as a shock. I don't think your side knows about us like we know about you, but that's cool. We can swap stories. I'll keep it short for now, but I hope to hear from you again soon. Glory and peace, Scott." I read the letter 3 times. I really couldn't tell that I didn't write it, other than the content itself, which was decidedly weird. Whoever was doing this was either a good prankster, or I had a dedicated stalker that had taken the time to learn my handwriting. Either way, I was calling their bluff. "Hey man, good to get a response. So are you like in some other world? That's crazy. Tell me some facts about your world and we can compare. And if you have some kind of souvenir that you can send next time, that'd be awesome. Looking forward to the next letter." I put the new letter in an envelope, addressed it, and set it on my desk. I then took out my tablet, plugged it in, and set the camera to record at an angle where I could see my desk and the door to my bedroom. I thought about just sitting there and waiting, but the idea was too tedious and would make it less likely that anyone would come back. That was assuming that this wasn't some kind of one-shot joke or harassment. But time would tell. Either way, I decided to go grab something to eat and to go see a movie. 4 hours later, I returned home to another blue letter. I understand you're skeptical, thinking this is all a joke, right? Well, here's some info like you asked, and I sent along something that might help convince you. Our world is a lot like yours, though it's different in some ways. About 40 years ago, we had a lot of animals start dying off. Not all of them, of course, but most of the birds, all of the dogs, and a few other species here and there. Still don't know why, but around that same time, we lost our mirrors. What I mean is, Our mirrors stopped showing our reflections. A lot of them just went dark, but some of them, where they have twins in your world, would show your reflections instead. We knew it was reflections because all the writing was backwards, and I could tell from your letters that you don't actually write backwards anyhow. But after that, a lot of people started changing, getting weird or violent. It's stabilizing some now, but it was really bad when I was younger. A lot of people died. Anywho, like I said, things are a lot better now, though we do have some odd stuff pop up and people go missing some. Is your world like that? From what I've seen, and what I know studies people on our side have done, observing active mirrors, it seems like things are a lot better over there. If so, I'm kinda jealous. But enclosed you'll find one of our nickels. It has Robert Kennedy on it. He was president from 1969 through 1977. I don't know for sure, but I think he's one of the big differences between your place and mine. Right back soon. I looked at the back of the envelope and found a nickel tucked in the corner. On one side it had a man's profile, with the name Robert F. Kennedy listed under it. On the other side, it looked like a large turkey glorying over a shield bristling with spears and covered with stars and stripes. What the fuck? I remember my tablet and checked the footage. It actually stopped recording after 2 hours, but it was enough. At the 42-minute mark, I watched my cream envelope give a shudder and disappear. 30 minutes later, a blue envelope had faded into existence a few inches over on the desk. I wasn't sure what to do at this point. I thought about asking Christine for advice, but it would be too hard to explain over the phone, and I didn't want her to worry. I could call the police, but what good is it gonna do? Even if I showed them the video, they probably would think it was fake and I was a jackass wasting their time. I don't know if I believed everything the letter was saying, but I couldn't deny the evidence was compelling. And if this guy really was another me, it could wind up being something really great. I might even become famous for discovering some parallel dimension. But first things first, I needed to write another letter. Wow, so this is big news, right? You're saying that you can see us through the mirrors? Well, that's kind of embarrassing. Could you hear us too or just see us? Do your people have theories on how this happened? Have other people in your world had this happen where they could talk to people from my world? I'm very curious, need to know more. This time I watched as my letter disappeared, only to be replaced with another response a short time later. Yeah, you've got a lot of questions. I understand. No, we can't hear, just see. I don't know if anyone else has actually communicated like this before. No one knows why my world's changing so much. When the other things started appearing last year, people said it was the end of the world. That we were being judged. But people are just going crazy, you know? I don't believe in all that stuff. Things are changing and we just had to change with it. Hey, did you say you have a Christine? Is she that hot blonde girl there? She's your girlfriend? I didn't like the tone of the new letter. And I had even more questions now. But I wanted to keep talking to him, so I tried to respond in a way that would make him happy. Yeah, she's my girlfriend. She's great. We're planning to get married next year. Do you have a Christine too? Tell me more about your world when you can. My letter shuddered away fairly quickly, and I waited for an answer, but none came. It was getting late, so I eventually went to bed, though I would wake up periodically and check my desk. Around 6 in the morning, I saw a blue envelope, and I jumped out of bed to read the 2 lines written there. I do have a Christine, but she's a fucking whore. I had to punish her. I hope yours isn't a whore too. I was done. I didn't know what this was, but I knew it had to be real, and I was feeling more and more like it was dangerous. Throwing the letter down, I started looking around my room. I saw a small mirror I had hanging in the back of my closet and yanked it down quickly, hearing it crack as it hit the floor. I tried to think of any others, and the only ones that came to mind were in the bathroom and the one that Christine hung over the mantel in the living room. Christine! I looked at my phone and saw that it was almost 7. She was going to be back in town this morning, probably coming straight here. I tried calling her, but it went straight to voicemail, like it was powered off. I didn't have her parents' number, so I had resorted to leaving her a voicemail and a text telling her not to come by my apartment, that I would meet her at hers when she got back. I debated on what to do until she arrived. but ultimately decided that I couldn't stand being in my apartment by myself. So I left a note on the door saying, "Christine, don't go into the apartment, call me instead. I'll explain and meet you." And I left the building. For the next few hours, I basically drove a circuit between our two apartments, occasionally parking outside one place or another. I was sitting outside her place when I got a call from her phone. It was her mother. She said that Christine had knocked her phone into the toilet, getting ready for bed last night, and that they had put in a bowl of rice to dry out. When Christine left to come back home a few hours ago, she must have forgotten it. I felt my mouth go dry. Her mother was asking me what she should do to get Christine her phone, but I told her I'd have to call her back and hung up. Based on when she left, she should have been back at least an hour ago. At that point, I knew she wasn't at her apartment, so I sped over to mine. I saw her car parked down the street from my place, and my head started pounding. Running up the stairs, I reached the door and saw that the note that I left was gone. In its place was a blue sheet of nice stationery bearing a drawing of a red-ink tart and the words, "Come on in my handwriting. I started yelling her name as I fumbled the door open, but as I entered I could tell she wasn't there. The apartment felt empty and lifeless. I ran into the bedroom, stumbling to a stop at the doorway. My mind had difficulty making sense of what I was seeing at first. On the wall next to my desk, there were strips of paper plastered to the wall, making an outline of a small door, about 3 feet tall. The strips seemed to be a combination of blue and cream paper. Speckled here and there were spots of crimson and soggy near the baseboard, where there were partially bloody handprints on both sides, as though someone was trying to hold on. Leading away from the paper door was covered with more blood. As I looked closer, I could see several thick runnels in the wood that I thought first were scrapes or cuts of some kind by something heavy being dragged. But then I saw one of Christie's bloody fingernails torn off the nail bed and ragged, jutting out of one of the grooves she had raked into the floor in her fight to get away. I collapsed on the floor and began crying. After a few minutes I pulled myself together, enough to look around the room for any other clues or some means of helping her. That's when I saw the blue envelope on my desk. You were right, she's a hot one, better than mine even. But I can tell she has the same slutty ways. It's in her eyes, but don't you worry, she'll find less tolerance for that over here. I'll be sure to keep her corrected. Don't bother on trying to come across either, bud. I figured out how to do it. But I'm gonna have to keep that close to my vest. I have to apologize for not being completely honest before. Things are worse here than I let on. Maybe Christine can keep me happy and satisfied with my life. But who's to say? Like I told you, some people are really losing it over here. I might have to come visit again sometime, more permanently. Till then, glory and peace, or as you would say, sincerely Scott. As I'm finishing writing this, I dread going back into the room. I know I have no way of getting her back now. I know I can't have her blood being found in my apartment. Even without hard evidence, there will be questions when she's reported missing. But all of that is in the background at the moment. I can't shake the feeling of being watched. I look around and see no one. But then I notice in the dingy brass door of the elevator across the hall where I'm sitting. The reflection is dark and distorted, but I can see myself in it, or at least a version of myself. It looks like me, but I can tell it isn't, because that version of me is laughing. I'll say it right now. I grew up in a broken home. Dad drank, Mom drank. That might be why I've never touched a drop, but I'm getting on a tangent here. Most of you already know where the story is going. Dad used to get drunk and blame Mom and I for all of his problems. Mom used to lock me in my room while well, you know what aggressive drunks do when they are upset. I'd say more often or not, my mom's screams and my own sobs were what rocked me to sleep. Then my mom started drinking and becoming numb to the whole thing. First Dad kept hitting her and left me to cry in my room. I guess he got bored eventually. 3 days after my 5th birthday, Dad came in my room for the first time. He had never done that before. Mom had stopped him. He broke my nose that first night. We went to the hospital, and I told the doctor I fell down the stairs, and he seemed to believe me. It was like clockwork after that. Mondays, Dad would work late, and we rested. Tuesdays and Thursday nights, he was at the bar until well after my bedtime. Wednesdays were the worst. Fridays were normally insults and an occasional slap. Weekends, he drank himself to sleep around 4 in the afternoon. But Wednesdays, he'd come into my room and do his business. If I blocked the door, it would be a dozen rounds with a belt. If I cried, I'd get a slap for every tear. But if I was quiet and let his knuckles crack against my jaw and let him pull my short hair, I'd never have to make up stories at school. I was an adventurous boy, and no one looked twice when my hands were scraped or I had a bruise on my cheek. I lived for 2 years, feeling that one night my dad would hit me too hard and I would end up with the angels. Death scared me. One Wednesday, I was sitting in the corner when I saw him, a tall man in my corner. At first, I thought it was a woman. It looked like a black dress fell from the black face. I realized after a moment that it was a robe, a cloak, but I learned that word years later. I knew what I was looking at. I watched TV, I've read books, I knew what death was supposed to look like. But I wouldn't cry. Dad would come in, and I would get the belt, and death would take me away. But for all the pain in my life, I knew I wanted to live. That night I fell asleep on the floor, huddled in the corner of the room with a halo of moonlight coming from the window, resting around my feet. Death simply stood in the darkest corner of my room, behind the door leading to the hall. He was there every bad night after, always Wednesdays, some Fridays when my dad was in his worst mood. Every night he got closer. After 2 months, he would sit on the toy box at the end of my bed, sitting with his back against the wall, turned sideways, so I always caught a profile of his shadowy hood. "Why are you here?" I asked one night. He stared at me from the toy box, knees pressed to his chest and arms curled around his shins, almost in the fetal position, though there was no fear in the position, just boredom. "To watch," he told me. I swallowed at those first words. I had expected a quiet rasp, like on TV. Death's voice was something more. It was a burly man's confidence, and strong. It was a caring mother's nurturing tone, a madman's laugh, and a child's giggle. It disturbed and comforted me. "To watch what?" I asked. He simply looked at me. I saw his eyes for the first time that night. I had always expected soulless pits there. Instead, I found blue orbs in a bleached skull. Those orbs held the galaxies, eternal and non-existent. Everything and nothing lived in the shadows of his cloak. Those contradictions comforted me. "Over you, child," Death responded. I had thought he lied to me, and I grew upset. I asked him why he never stopped my father. "It's not my place to intervene," he told me. I asked him what he meant. He told me that he couldn't stop my father even if he tried. He was simply there to guide me if my worst nightmare ever came true. After that night, Death was more of a father to me. In a way, my own never was. The next week, he brought a thick, leather-bound book. Within were fairy tales, dark and light themes, in countless languages. He told me the stories in the voice of my grandmother, who died when I was 4. When I got older, he stopped bringing the book. Instead, we stayed up till the crack of dawn talking. I asked him about the afterlife and why things are the way they were. He always answered vaguely, telling me that I'd understand one day. He stayed with me and comforted me until dawn peeked over my neighbor's roof. Then the sunlight would touch his black robe, turning it into a blind white. Then he was gone. He'd be back next week, and I'd get ready for school. I never tired when Death spoke to me. Life went on. When I was 12, my doctor fixed my nose for the 3rd time and started asking questions. Within 3 weeks, I was taken from that home and put in an orphanage. In a Hollywood moment, my family doctor, who had heard about what had been happening from a friend at the hospital, adopted me. He and his wife had been trying for a child for years, but they never did. I lived a happy life after that. I never forgot what happened to me in my youth, though. I followed in my new father's footsteps and became a physician. Sadly, jobs were tight, and I took a role in the morgue. All those years around death helped me work with my new job, and I enjoyed it. My heart broke when my new mother was in an accident. I was the one that put the toe tag on her. I had to take the rest of the week off. But death was there that day. He stood in the corner of the storage room when I closed the drawer. Holding his skeleton hand was a little girl with green eyes and chocolate hair. I had seen my mother's family pictures and knew it was her, around 7 years old. It hurt me, but death nodded to me, and I knew that he would take care of her. In my lifetime, I've closed the drawer on 4 of my parents. Dad drove into a storefront when driving drunk. I had to leave the room when they wheeled him in. I would have spat on his cold husk of a body if I didn't. Mom drank herself into an early grave a year later. I pitied her when I closed the drawer. He had broken her soul, and she died in pain. Though my mother left the morgue the same way that my new mother did, I still remember the screams when death dragged my father through the floor, a red-hot chain and metal collar strapped around his neck. My father, the man that saved my life, died 4 years ago. He went quietly in his sleep. I volunteered to close the drawer on him. When I did, death arrived and took a little boy with dark hair and blue eyes. You may wonder why I'm writing this. In truth, I'm not quite sure myself. I guess I want to tell people not to fear death. He's a gentle being with a crappy job, and he saved my life. With the life he gave me, I've married. I've raised 3 children, 2 girls and a boy who look just like their mother. I have 9 grandchildren and 2 great-grandchildren, and a 3rd on the way. I lost my wife last year to a heart attack. It still hurts me to think about, but I know that she didn't fear death. She knew my story, the one I'm telling to you now, and she went in her sleep, holding my hand. As I write these final thoughts, I look to my window. Out there I see a figure in the street, snow blowing white on black robes. A moment ago I opened the window to invite him in. When you live this long, you learn how to treat guests right. Now he's standing in the corner, patient as the day I met him. When I'm done with this post, I'll turn off my laptop, put the little girl he brought with him on my lap and close my eyes. My wife will close her brilliant blue eyes and rest her crimson locks on my chin. I'll take a breath and fall asleep. When I wake up, I'll be with my family. I'll see my mother and father again. I'll see my birth mom, happier than she was in life. I'll see my 4 dogs that I've had in my lifetime too, hopefully. Mortemor, death calls from the corner. I sigh and type faster. If I could say one last thing, I'd like to quote Blue Oyster Cult. Don't fear the Reaper, because after all, people are the real monsters. I started doing it on a whim. My brother had an unhealthy obsession with online vloggers. I can barely go a day without him linking me to a video of someone taking part in some sort of challenge or some sort of social experiment. So when this whole deep web mystery box trend started, I was one of the first to know. My brother must have sent me dozens of videos of annoying preteens opening boxes full of junk that they tried to pass off as creepy and sinister. When my brother asked me for my opinion, I told him that it combined all the boredom of unboxing videos with all the stupidity of the Tide Pod challenge. I added that most of them were probably making the boxes themselves. Even I could do it. And then the wheels started turning. A quick search confirmed that it was a growing trend, with hundreds of people claiming to have opened up boxes containing everything from drugs to murder weapons to mystery flash drives. Some vloggers even claimed that they had spent thousands of dollars on a single mystery box. Those were obviously fake, but what about the rest? Were there really people out there who would spend at least $100 for a chance to go viral? I bet that they would, and unfortunately, I was right. Putting the mystery box together was easier than I expected. I had some cardboard boxes stuffed in the back of my closet that turned out to be perfect size for the job. Some rusty screwdrivers provided as perfect murder weapons. My desk drawer offered a surprising number of old flash drives. I had made mystery box ready by filling them with as many creepy videos as I could download. Finally, some expired sinus tablets provided me with some mysterious deep web drugs once I peeled the labels off. Getting a website set up on the deep web was a little harder, but you can find an online tutorial for anything these days. By the time I was ready for bed, I was the proud owner of Emporium of Mysteries. For $50 of Bitcoin, anyone could be a proud owner of a mystery box. Sure, the site looked like it came straight out of the 90s, but it was good enough. I was in business. The next morning, I went looking for customers. Fortunately, my brother's messages had made me very familiar with the online vlogging community. I messaged a few of the smaller channels with some burner accounts that I had made and left a few comments on their latest videos. You should do a deep web unboxing video. You know what would be really cool? Unboxing something from the deep web. I bet you get millions of views. I heard about this new place on the deep web called Emporium of Mysteries. They sell mystery boxes there. You should check them out. Then all I had to do was sit back and wait. By the end of the day, I had 6 purchases. Not much all put together, but enough to put food on the table. By the end of the afternoon, I had the boxes ready to ship. I wasn't looking to scam these people after all. They still got to make their stupid videos, and I got to eat. Everyone was happy. I sold a few more over the next few weeks, but eventually, interest died down. Life went on. My brother sent me more stupid videos, and I gradually forgot about the time that I was a deep web merchant. Until last Friday, when I got home and there was a package waiting for me outside my apartment door. I picked it up and examined it. I realized that it was one of my mystery boxes. It looked like it had an unhappy customer, but it wasn't like they were getting their money back. I took it inside and opened it. It was empty, other than a flash drive that I did not recognize. I was curious to see what was on it, but I wasn't about to let some distinguished hacker infect my computer, so I got my old laptop that I hardly use anymore and plugged it in. It was full of pictures of my hometown, of my apartment, of me. Whoever sent this had been following me, had been inside my home. Staring at those pictures, I started to recognize just how out of my depth I was. You see, not everything you find on the deep web is fake. There are some people out there who do sell real mystery boxes, and they are tired of scammers like me taking away from their profits. Thankfully, they are very generous people and want to give me a second chance. So I am pleased to announce that the Emporium of Mysteries is under new management. Now, for the same low price, you can receive a genuine mystery box. It will include a special tool for my new partner's personal collection, along with a video instructing you how to use it and co-starring myself. The body part or organ extracted during the video will also be included as a special memento. Supplies are limited, so search us out in the deep web as soon as possible. We're looking forward to your business. One of the hottest trends on YouTube right now is ordering these random mystery boxes from complete strangers on the deep web and opening them on camera. I don't know why I didn't realize that a clear majority of these were fake and staged for the scare factor, but I didn't. I thought it was a great idea and hopped on the bandwagon to claim my YouTube stardom that I desperately longed for. For those who do not know a lot about the deep web, it's simply a part of the internet that isn't accessible from your basic Chrome, Firefox, or Explorer search engines. You must download the encryption program, Tor, and the Tor browser for starters. It's not illegal to access this part of the internet, but since it's anonymous, a great deal of illegal actions happen there. The possibilities are endless. I grabbed my laptop I've had since I graduated in 2011 and download the required programs. I prefer to use my laptop over my desktop in case of viruses and such. My 7-year-old laptop is a little bit more disposable. I had a little Bitcoin phase a few years ago when it was blowing up, so I saved a little bit already. It wasn't much, only 0.1 Bitcoin, which translates to roughly $632, but it was enough to get what I was looking for. After all the downloads were finished, I opened the browser and started my journey at the Hidden Wiki website. They provide a lot of useful links to get started on the deep web. I scrolled through the warnings and gists of what it was and found the links I was looking for. Almost forgot, I muttered to myself as I grabbed the duct tape from my desk drawer. I cut a teeny square piece off and placed it over my webcam. Call me paranoid, but I'd rather be safe than sorry. I clicked the first link and waited what seemed like forever for the page to load. It was a very plain page with a list of popular websites that you can scroll through on the side. I continued my search through the web links until I found a page dedicated to mystery boxes. I wanted to find one around $500 so people knew I meant business on my channel. These were relatively small, staying around 0.0125 to 0.05 Bitcoin range. I wasn't worried about being scammed. I decided to continue my search after a quick bathroom break. When I came back, I noticed that the cursor was off to the side and was able to click on a link that must have matched the background color of the website because I couldn't see it. I indulged in my curiosity and clicked the link. I was taken to a pitch black page with small white text near the top. I'm selling one random package to any brave enough to receive it for only 0.12 Bitcoin. Only one, huh? I thought to myself. I'll shoot my shot. I hit the small payment button and was asked how much I would like to spend. I entered 0.1 Bitcoin with my fingers crossed. The payment went through without any hesitation, and I instantly was met with a chat box asking me where I would want the package sent. I know it wasn't a good idea, and I regret it to this day, but the other YouTube channels used their own address often, so I thought nothing of it. I gave them my home address. I waited over a month for the box to come in, 36 days to be exact. It arrived directly on my front porch and was wrapped numerous times in red tape. I set my camera on the tripod and adjusted it to show me and the box on the small wooden table. I draped a sheet in the background so it would look more professional. I collected some gloves and scissors so I could bang out this video in one go. Hey everybody, welcome to tonight's vlog. Boy, I got a surprise for you. I continued my monologue, mentioning how I got this box and how much I paid. Without wasting further time, let's open this deep web mystery box. I grabbed the scissors and cut along the red tape. I made sure my gloves were on tight, and I ripped open the box. My brow furrows as I see just one book. Without saying a word, I take the book out of the box. I was pretty pissed. Spent over $600 on a book. Well folks, looks like we have ourselves a dud. These pages better be made of gold. The outside of the book was old and tattered. It smelled like mildew and mold. I cracked the book open to the first page and glanced over the contents. It's an old photo album. Smells like old rot. Look at these pictures. I show the camera a view of the page contents. It has 4 pictures on the first page, all labeled by days. The first picture said day 1, the second said day 2, and so on. The pictures were just taken from an old Polaroid camera. The pictures were of airplanes, random suitcases, couple of taxis, and some pretty shady motels. Looks like someone's old travel photos. I continue flipping through the pages. Every day was a different photo of a nature of cars or trains. Day 18 held the oddest photo yet. It was just a mask, handcuffs, a gag, and a bottle of some sort of drug it looked like. These people had one hell of a fetish. I tried to keep the video interesting. I zoomed into the pictures with the camera so everyone could see it. Around day 32, things started getting weird. There was a picture of a house, but not just any house. It was a house I grew up in. My parents' house. My hands covered my mouth as I gasped for air. How was this? I was unable to form a sentence. I'm at a loss for words. Day 33. I turn the page and see a man and a woman handcuffed and gagged. I immediately expel the contents of my stomach as I see my own mom's scared and crying face and my dad, face first, in a pile of what looked like black tar. Day 34. This photo is taken inside of what looks like a vehicle. I focus my gaze on the dashboard, where there's a small photo barely visible. It's an old school photo of me. There in my dad's truck. Day 35. Another house, but this one is much smaller. The photo is too blurry to make out any details. My hands are trembling, and all I can hear is my heartbeat pounding in my ears. I flip to the last page. I immediately throw the book down on the ground and run to the window. I jiggle the hatch frantically and throw it open. Without hesitation, I jump out and run to my neighbors. As I'm running, I turn around for a brief second. What I saw still haunts me to this day. A tall hooded figure stood in my room, looking at me through the window. He stood motionless before lifting his hand and waving. I screamed for my neighbors, who hurried me inside and called the cops. I sat there and just cried. I cried out of fear for my life. I cried for my parents. I cried because it was all my fault. My lack of common sense got my parents killed, and I will have to live with that forever. If you access the deep web, do not release your personal information, even if the people on YouTube do. Most of it's not real. And always check your boxes. It would have saved me a lot of trouble if I would have noticed that the box I received had no tracking sticker on it. It was hand delivered. As you may have expected, the siege of Area 51 ended disastrously for everyone involved. How do I know? I was of the deluded, though determined congregation that stormed the base. Our numbers were minuscule in comparison to those who had pledged their participation online, but still we rated as a formidable army. Hundreds sprinted collectively in kind of a mutually shared mania. Our speeds, though impressive, did not surpass those of bullets. The guards were posted on the perimeter around the base, befitting any other military establishment. They hadn't expected a serious effort, at least not one of our size. And when we approached en masse, bored, inexperienced, and sun-fatigued soldiers snapped to delayed action as we beleaguered the compound. Some of us were immediately dispatched by on-site deterrents. Buried proximity sensors activated, anti-personnel turrets loaded with non-lethal rounds. Bodies fell in clusters, with a sizable portion of our admittedly pitiful army immediately turned back towards their vehicles. Those of us who persisted, determined to uncover the secrets of the legendary base, continued the onslaught. Armed with nothing but our cameras, makeshift gadgets, and curiosity, I remember leaping over a fallen comrade, his eyes pouring with tears, as he dabbed delicately with a napkin a large red mark on his forehead, where he had been struck with one of the automatic defense system's pellets. The group-borne energy was quickly depleted in the face of the base's efficient weaponry. By the time myself and others reached the actual fence that enclosed the base, the guards had already taken up the position of suppression, which would have easily been our doom if some of us hadn't anticipated such quick failure before we had even set foot on the actual grounds. No one had brought weapons, so as to avoid being charged with any major felonies, though we had equipped ourselves with various devices which we believed inimical to the human psyche. Every manner of hypnotic or hallucinogenic construction was employed. Devices meant to stun, disorientate, confuse, and baffle, hastily prepared and not so expertly used. Most of the guards we targeted merely laughed, with others who seemed to succumb, albeit minimally, to the desert effects. However, the momentary lapse in concentration and formation was all we needed. Our sheer numbers collided with theirs, to our favor. Upon breaching the perimeter fences, a great, exultant roar could be heard, as our forces tasted a small yet totally unforeseen victory. And the guards, who had been gatekeepers, merely stood in disbelief. Though our numbers had been reduced to only a few dozen, we searched through the massive plot of land with as much fervor as before, and dispensed into smaller groups to cover more ground. My group, comprised of those who sought the answers to the Roswellian mystery and hoped to capture images of the extra-mundane nature, entered a long and seamlessly spacious building to the east of the compound. The building's construction suggested that it used to be a hangar for aircraft, and I'm sure you can guess what sort of aircraft we expected to find. Most guards were present there, though we dispatched them without issue using our hypnotic gadgets. Inside, though indeed a hangar, we found only a regular, mundane aerial vehicle of earthling design. We maintained radio contact with other groups, and to our great disappointment, They reported similar failures in uncovering any extraterrestrial artifacts. Strangely, the group that believed the base housed non-alien, yet equally preternatural objects or presence hadn't reported their findings. My group unanimously agreed that this was troubling. Due to the group containing the hardest and most devoted of our congregation, we set out to find the silent detachment. A flame of interest reignited within us. By then, our numbers had dwindled to a fraction of what we first entered, most of them having been detained or slain by the armed personnel who saw us ransacking and looting as troublesome enough to warrant serious retaliation. Gunfire was heard, blood was smelled, and the screams were unnervingly cut short all around us. My group came across a duo of rather trigger-happy guards who had just neutralized an entire gang of truth seekers, and if it hadn't been for the sacrifice of those brave, we would have all fallen. He charged the guards, tackling them to the ground, allowing for us to escape into the unmarked building, whose stairs led into the earth. Behind us, the guards were struggling, and then the sound of a rifle. The building stairs led down for a great distance, and though I was never particularly good with determining geographical scale, I am at least certain that our descent measured a mile, perhaps more. Concrete walls with stairs descended interminably. The passageways illuminated, at intervals, by simple bulbs that dangled from chains affixed to the ceiling. We grew weary despite the downward trek, and 2 members fell from exhaustion. When we turned to help them, they demanded we continue on. Eventually we arrived at a large metal door, with a simple crank serving as a knob. I turned the crank, and after a strenuous effort, managed to open the door, which revealed a massive, dimly lit room, whose walls were lined with humming machinery. I recognized none of the devices and terminals that littered the room, nor did my companions. And most of what we saw seemed to be several years beyond anything of our time. The room, a gallery of super scientific design. In the center of the room was a raised, square black pad, about 12 by 12 feet, slightly bigger than a bedroom, with a metal podium linked to the machinery nearby. A sort of lamp hung over the platform, and a network of thick wiring and tubing led from the space into the unlit recesses of the room. Despite the ostensibly inert state of the machinery, we heard and felt a constant vibration emanate from the construction, a power of some kind that flowed to or from the weird platform. As we circled the thing, examining the very aspects of which I've related here, we at one point heard gunfire from the stairwell we had left, and the agonized cries of the exhausted couple. Our awestruck emotions turned to panic, frantic searching as we looked for some manner of defense from the attackers, or an escape from the room. No doors could be found. The only items capable of being weaponized were several steel chairs placed before the bizarre machinery. Doubting our success against the military combatants, I decided to make use of the focal pad. I've seen enough science fiction media to speculate that it was used for a transport of nature. Intuition and common sense allowed me to activate the machine to some degree, and the pad's overhanging lamp glowed hotly above us. Still determined to fight off the guards with the chairs, my companions gathered at the door and attempted to bar it with the chair leg, leaving me to operate the machine. After a series of button presses of no particular order, the pad began emitting a low yet powerful hum, and the digital display of the podium began counting down from 30. A small screen to the left of this displayed a series of numbers which obviously pertained to a date. And without needing a second of self-reassurance, I plotted a temporal location considerably before the current date. I practically leaped onto the pad, and just as I felt the vibrations and strange, inexpressible pulsations overcome my body, I saw the door defending group get blown back by some explosive device. What happened next, I cannot accurately describe. There was a sensation of dematerialization and atomic destruction, and subsequent reformation, and then a transference of form, not across the physical distance, but through some more abstract, illimitable expanse, as if I was blasted into existence. I don't know if it was through time or reality I traveled, and my instantaneous voyage was one of chronological reversal, or if I had been admitted to a reality where the entity resembling myself had not yet embarked into the ill-fated assault. If this was truly my original world, and I've defied the once irreversible current of time, then I can only warn you all of what happened if you attend that stupid, perilous storm. If the machine's purpose is of an arguably grander nature, and I've been cast into a mirrored realm of my own, then my astonishment still stands. I'm not sure what to make of things. I feel as if I've merely been given a second chance in my own timeline. However, there are certain things which puzzle me about this place. Namely, how no one in this realm seems to have heard of the recent declassified lunar compound that our group planned to siege after Area 51, where the secrets of the extinct anti-human lizard men are rumored to be kept. When I was younger, I liked to window shop at the deep web. It wasn't anything serious. I would just look at the prices of various substances and how to get them delivered. That was my first exposure to cryptocurrency, and I wish I had never bought my first Bitcoin. There's a forum out there. I wish I could tell you that it was dead and buried by now, but I know it isn't. I know because they're still tracking me. The first thread I read, there seemed like some kind of gambling action. Admins would take bets and the users would place them. But the bets weren't on sports or horse racing, not even on cockfights. They were on suicides. Who would do it when and why? Who would push them over the edge and be the straw to break the camel's back? In order to place any bets, I would have to exchange Bitcoin for Deathcoin. The process was difficult, very difficult for a kid in high school. But when I finally did, it was exhilarating. The person I chose was, at the time, another high schooler. Her name was Karen, and she was in the same town that I am, but went to a different school. Once the bet was placed, I was delivered via PDF a dossier on her life. I knew her habits and routines. I knew how long it took her to wake up in the morning and how long it took her to go to sleep. I even knew her favorite color, which was blue. I bet that after a year of harassment, she would be in a wooden box 6 feet under. The admins would dedicate a thread to each victim for updates on their progress, and each victim had several field workers dedicated to them. They received the same dossier I did. The difference is that they went outside and put it to use. Field agents would covertly harass her in all ways, graffiti directed at her, speaking about her all day within an earshot, and the most daring agents broke into her house regularly. They didn't steal anything though. What they did was move her furniture ever so slightly in the same direction for months. Needless to say, this brought her past her brink. Karen began hearing voices in her head, and she couldn't distinguish them from the ones outside. They would all tell her the same thing: kill yourself. And so on the first Friday of October, she exited her parents' house and made it into the garage with her mother's keys. The engine sparked and the exhaust filtered from the muffler into the car. She passed out an hour later. The field agents had won like they always do. Congratulations, Karen Walters was found dead this morning in her mother's car. The lucky winner is user number 228305504. Attached to the thread was the article about the suicide. My number was just a few days before the winners, so I lost hundreds of bucks, but I did get to watch someone spiral down for a year. Like I said before, it was exhilarating and well worth it. Who wouldn't pay $100 for front row seats of someone ending it? We all would. Humanity is a dark thing, and I'm no exception. But the loss left a bad taste in my mouth, so I never placed another bet. I didn't even return to the forum for years, until I noticed my couch was slightly out of place. Cold sweat beaded down my neck, and I turned my computer on and fired up Tor for the first time since high school. It took some digging, but I finally found the site, and there I was, a whole thread dedicated to me. I was chosen, but I have something that the others don't. I know what you're doing, and I'll be coming for you.